Cool. Yeah. Lots of crazy stuff. The past week has been really interesting. Like, um, we had like we found like this one like a few of like the devs were working under this like one farmer dev, and then like they were basically giving 90% of what we were paying them to like this main dev. And then I'm like, all right, like apparently there's like a decent amount of people in the community, and then everyone was like, okay, we have to vet all these addresses now. So it's just like kind of goes back to what I was saying last week or the week before. Like we want missionaries, not mercenaries. So we're basically spending a lot of that time just filtering out people that weren't really doing adequate work, and like they would basically be like getting bounties and then not really doing much. And I would still stay vigilant as best I could. Like I would check all the work before I would pay. But sometimes when you're really tired, you don't really um, you aren't really like fully aware of like the progress sometimes. So like having other people in the community help justify, like help like evaluate, and is something that we're doing. And with this new update, like the general subnet will be essentially meant for community validated like modules will be getting the most reward, instead of like it being kind of like slightly under the table where we kind of like go around. So it's kind of like going into a more decentralized mechanism, even though anyone technically with stake and tokens can like stake on anyone's module, and they would get incentives without uh, me approving it. So like, this is fully decentralized, but obviously lots of liquidity is concentrated in like a set of wallets. So like our goal is to spread that stake and incentive like as much as possible without spreading it too much, such that like people are earning tokens without deserving it. Um, so that's kind of like a lot of like the mental process right now. There's lots of things changing. We have the update, obviously, that's pending. We're going to be doing another update the next week and the or like early the week after, to essentially update our subnet pricing model. Um, but yeah, like lots of things, and then also like I'm trying to get this core repo merged into main so that we can like have a much smoother experience on like the developer side, and like how to mine and stuff, and like creating subnets. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we're doing, but also a lot of work nonetheless. Yeah, but definitely testing times to say, like lots of things happening at once, and I'm like, I don't really get a lot of times to take a break. So like, usually I take a break with by working too hard and then not being able to press a key. But I'm trying to make it more like sporadic, like where I can like take breaks and like manage people. Sometimes I'll like intentionally not like go on Discord because it's just like so distracting sometimes with like a lot of people who aren't claiming bounties or don't do full work, expect to be paid sometimes, and we're trying to crack down on that. We're trying to create a system where you can get paid and you can contribute, you get tokens, whatever. But the idea is for it to be um, like really like you deserve what you get paid. You complete the bounties. Some people don't really complete the bounties and they expect to get the paid the amount, and then they prolong the deadline. This is how projects blow up in cost. So we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to remove any like farming, like developer farming kind of tools, because that the reason why I'm against that is because like at least in this particular case, people were giving 90% of their revenue to this main guy, which means I was paying them for 10% work. And like, the money that I was giving them was like a lot of it was going not to just them. So it's like they're not fully incentivized to do the work. So I might as well not pay them the full amount. And then like, I'm trying to basically get a lot of these devs to jump ship. from the dev. Like, it's hard because they lied to me. But I'm also trying to like not nuke the projects that they're doing because I'm gonna have to find other people. So like I'm trying to like get them to work with me, but at the same time, you don't know these people's identities, so they could be the main guy for all you know. Like they could all be one person. It's just hard, and it's something that's new to me. But anyways, yeah, that's like that was a whole ordeal I have to deal with continually. Um, and yeah, we're just trying to make it better. How do we like do this more like proactively? How do we let the community decide what's a legit project and what's not? And then like basically how do we incentivize the community to do that is another thing we're thinking of. But this should all be clear next week. We'll make an announcement of how we will incentivize people to like contribute to other things and not just like stake and hold on like a subnet sometimes or on like a validator. Like we want to basically incentivize people to be active. And like this is important because if everyone's inactive and if people aren't really like doing much and like they're then it's like we'll have an issue where too much stake will be on like a few validators and people aren't going to bother to move it unless they're incentivized to. Um, so like we want people to support new projects and not like have to like always stick to like older projects all the time. Like we want this ecosystem to grow, but we're not. Yeah, we're trying to figure it out. Like we're trying to figure out the best way of doing it. Um, but yeah, I think early next week we'll be making an announcement. I'm not gonna fully talk about it yet because it's just like well, I could talk about it like in terms of what we're thinking of in the future. And you can ask questions. I'm not. I don't mind. I'm talking about what we think so far in terms of the future direction. But yeah, like it's not. I'm still in the works, and but I expect it to be like fully polished for like Monday in terms of that proposal. But we can talk about it as well, and we can talk about anything you guys want to ask about in terms of like any questions or concerns. So we can do that.
I mean, there's been a lot of changes lately that have been made positive for all of this stuff. Really, I think with the new developer Discord coming in motion and all the other guys that have come on board helping you to offload a little bit of that stuff you've been doing. I think that a lot of this is going to be really, really, really good for us, for everybody in the community.
Yeah, no, a lot of cool changes. Like clearly, I can't host this entire network myself. There's lots of people that are helping me out, and I think sometimes my problem is I like to do everything, but that's like a very unrealistic slash counterproductive way of thinking. Like maybe in certain cases, sure, like you can do everything and it'll get it done quicker, and sure, like, but not for like an entire community or blockchain. There's just too many moving parts. And so like yeah, I want to just like share my appreciation to like everyone that's trying to like help out and believing in commune. Like this is obviously a long road ahead. There's lots of like there's gonna be lots of ups and downs. I can imagine we've already experienced a lot of them, but like I'm obviously gonna be here, uh, and yeah, like like for those that stick here, like obviously that's amazing to see that despite all the hiccups we go through, but we build honestly, and we try to improve and listen to criticism, and yeah, I think that's a good way to go about things. Who are the
But
core devs of Commune? So okay, so the way this works is it's quite decentralized. So most of my work is essentially right now the core Commune repo, which is like not the blockchain, more like the validators, miners, and like the documentation, the core Commune repo that the original repo essentially. The blockchain is being mostly handled by the AGI commies, and slash like Communex people that created Communex. And so they're working on that portion, and that's kind of like separate. Like we're kind of separate teams. We have our pseudo keys. We have 5 pseudo keys that control the chain. And so even if I want to make a change, I can't. I would need approval from two other people, and so like I've given them to like this is a temporary solution, obviously, but and that we're not it's not going to be a permanent system. But right now, it's like it takes away my control, so I'm giving them. I have them. I have ComSwap, Huck, Timo, Hansa, and me are the owners of those 5 keys, and I can like even list them down in a document as well. And so, but we want to essentially make this more decentralized. We don't want us controlling the mechanism, or like that's just for like making like pseudo changes. So it's not for like we can't change everything. We can change like only the global parameters mainly, and we can do runtime upgrades. So that's basically like the core team for the substrate. Then you have ComStaffs, which is like and ComSwap, which are their own separate entities, and then and then obviously all the devs that are working with me through bounties. So there's no core like commune developers. A lot of the developer power was done into building modules, which I would admit to being part of my mistake of like not having to focus on core stuff. We do have some developers focusing on documentation and like improving performance of like the core repo, but there's no like full-time core develop. Like it's pretty loosely defined. But I think having more of a dedication to the core repo is obviously something that is worth doing for the future weeks. Can you define pseudo changes? No. So pseudo changes are basically basically a pseudo. This is a proof of authority network, which means that right now we are running the authority nodes, and so technically, if something were to go wrong, we could like obviously like stop the chain, fix the problem, and then continue it on, and that requires a lot of trust in us, obviously. Um, and so the goal is to make a transition to a proof of stake model in probably the coming months. I wouldn't give you an exact date, but we want to essentially become a more decentralized validator, the blockchain, over the next, like probably by June or July. So that's in a few months. But right now, our goal is to make sure that the incentives work correctly, essentially stabilize a proper ecosystem where people are sharing and building stuff. That requires a lot, like some work still. But I think once we solidify this, we can then fully decentralize the process in terms of like having validators not be just us. And so we have like some providers like on Finality that will be willing to host more validators, and we want to increase our validator set. The number of validators in our these aren't like these are blockchain validators. These aren't like mining validators. These are blockchain validators that we want to basically use a proof of stake model. So, but until then, we're using the pseudo keys to essentially manage like global parameters of the network so that things don't break. And then I think once the next state of that is essentially removing those pseudo keys and letting the network vote on whether it wants to change certain parameters. The issue with that though is that it could change a parameter that might who knows, like we're still thinking about that, but we have the capacity to essentially turn off all pseudo keys and let the network just vote. And so that might not be fully in place until I would say maybe a month. Like we'll be able to probably be ready to have a fully decentralized pseudoless like uh chain. Like doesn't mean we're gonna activate it, but we already have like the voting system that basically allows the community to propose and accept global changes without the pseudo keys approval. You can do that with the subnet as well. You just need more than half the stake to agree that these changes do exist or should happen. And the same happens on like the global level. So if more than half of the community wants to change the global parameters, then like they just basically just put their stake You don't have, like, they based on how much stake they have or their key is staked on the network, they can vote. And if half the stake approves it of, like, say, a change, a pseudo change, then the network will approve. Well, we'll do it automatically. So we have that in place, but we haven't really enacted it yet because we feel that there's still some changes we need to continue the network, like before we fully go into that decentralized mode. So transitioning proof of stake network, would that remove mining? No. Well, that, yeah, I guess that's another form of mining. You could maybe get a pretty meta where you can, like, have one sub network that basically, like, incentivizes the proof of stake mining of the blockchain. um, like, that is something that you could do, where you could have a proof of authority network, and then, like, basically, if you're one of the authorities, then you can, like, you're voted on this, like, you're incentivized, you're given tokens from Commune. You can do it that way, but ultimately, it's probably just better to do, like, proof of stake subnet. So it would be like, not subnet, a proof of stake validator system, um, as the next transition for, like, the blockchain. And so, yeah, like, that's something that that we plan on doing, but it wouldn't remove mining. No. It would just, we might have to lock a portion of the emissions to the validators, but it'll probably be a very small fraction. It could also be a subnet too. That's basically equivalent, but we haven't really thought about that far. We can talk about it a bit more though. Are there plans to make validators always validate things? Because we are currently doing a lot of self-voting. My plans pretty much every kind of AI inference. Yeah. So, well, the validators don't self-vote. um, the validators are essentially just querying the network. So when the validator validates a network, it will have a bunch of addresses on that network. And so it's just going around the addresses and then pinging them, oh, do you have this function? I'm going to call it. Okay, is it giving me back a good output? All right, it's giving, okay, we score 1. If not, 0. That's like, that's not, like, you could obviously make it, you can make it, like, maybe you can have, like, 500 miners running on the network and then vote for all of them. You could do that, but everyone can do that too. And so, like, and you're also spending a lot of tokens registering those miners. So, like, you could do that, yeah. Like, you like, I think the point, like, that's the hard part of these systems. If you make them super easy, people will find really easy exploit, or not exploits, but, like, things to do, like self vote. But I don't know, like, that's also another topic. I'm a bit, like, I have a strong take on that, where I'm like, okay, well, like, if people self vote, then their APR is high. So we want to discourage self voting for sure, but you can't assume it's always going to be there, or it's always going to be, like, taken away. I think there's always a way for people to self vote. Even if you even if you discourage it, like, there's just so much, like, ways to, like, to self vote. So it's like, you have to, like, I think leaning into it sometimes is a good thing. And this, like, and we are creating, like, a lot of the anti cabal mechanisms that have the disincentivize self voting, but it's like, I don't know, like, people can like create a lot of keys, and so, like, you don't know who's who. So it's like, the fact that you haven't solved identity and self voting, maybe you need, like, ZK to help, like, ZK identity to help solve it. But, like, if you don't have that, then it's like, I think solving self voting might add a lot of complexity, and if you're not fully solving it, then, and if you add a lot of complexity, you're basically just allowing a few people who've gone through that complexity of your protocol to, like, find maybe, like, a certain thing that no one else like has found. Because, and I don't know, it's just, I'm thinking about it. I want to make this simple. I want to make this protocol simple. I want to basically have it so that, you stake on something and you can use it. That's it. I don't, like, I feel like if we add too many rules, it's just gonna take away from that simplicity. But yeah, that simplicity does come with it, the drawbacks of, like, oh, if I can just vote for this key. Why can't I just vote for my own? Yeah, that is true. Um, but it's like, okay, like in that case, like the whole premise is that like self-voting is a bad thing, and maybe you can share your thoughts. But from my perspective, like for me to vote for you, if we, let's say if we had a fully self-voting system, everyone would vote for themselves, and I would only vote for you if you give me something of value. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep on voting for myself and have a high APR. There's ways to mitigate that, and the trust matrix is one way. What like the trust matrix is definitely like something where it's like you get not only is the stake based, but like if more people vote for you, you get like a trust score. Like if 3 people vote for me, then I get a trust score of 3. And so if I have like 10 times the stake as you, but then you only have 1 person voting, and I have 3 people voting for me, then I'll have a higher score. Now, how much that affects the stake is like a ratio between 0 and 100, or 0 and 1. Like, it's like if I have a trust score of 3 and a stake of 10, and it's like 50-50, then I take half, like I get 50-50 of those two values. And if it's like 10-90, then I get 10% trust and then 90% stake. And you can just tailor that to like whatever you want. Like if you want a fully trust based system with no stake, then you can do, like, the point is to have people be able to do this. And yeah, like I don't know. Sorry, is that answer your question? I'm rambling.
Well, I was wondering as well if I can maybe check for you a bit about the current planning, where we have a lot of documentation changes coming up, and also with the tokenomics and, well,
Yes.
so have you been looking more into that?
Yes. Uh, like, well, I've been actively working into that. Yes. But basically, I'm getting the the core repo of Commune, which basically separates the non like acquired modules, so like the uncore modules, and like the core modules. So I'm trying to isolate the core, um, and so people can essentially use that core and then like connect different repos, and then make their own subnets and whatnot. And so like basically the new documentation we want to do, trying to be releasing later today or tomorrow, is essentially how do you make a module. Well, we already kind of went through how to make a module, really, but it's more so like how do you mine, um, how do you make a new subnet, how do you manage it. These aren't really difficult things. um, like it's hard to get everything in place and like working, but like I think that just showing those things, or how to make a subnet, how to manage it, how to like stake to your subnet, how to like register a module onto multiple subnets, um, like understanding what the incentive is. That's a big problem we have, I think, is that we're so general, is that it's anyone can validate anything, really. But the issue with that is like no one knows. The miner side is quite ambiguous. So that made it really hard for miners to be like, oh, what the hell do I do? And so having a hybrid model of like we have this general main subnet, but then we have like these other subnets that can be like that they can use like Yuma consensus, and they can use like at least we want it to be able to do Yuma consensus. And right now I think the other subnets are locked to Unima consensus right now, but we want to add additional properties. Like I'm letting the blockchain team, like this is why it's decentralized. It's like this is just me, I would be like, oh fuck this, I'm just keeping this. But I'm letting the team make this runtime upgrade because I think that they have some good points, and I think we should try a few of the changes that they have been like curating from the community, and then we're gonna go a certain way, and then we're gonna go another way too. And so expect a lot of like corrections with like a lot of runtime upgrades. Maybe like I would expect 2 or 3 in the next few weeks. But for me personally, what I'm working on, I'm just doing like I'm making sure things are faster, more synced up with the chain. And yeah, that the documentation is more readable and like more passable for like early users.
But I think with all the changes that with the documentation that you mentioned and all the overhaul with the both discords, it's going to be a lot easier for everybody to find this information now. Finally, I think, because I think the information has been there. It's just been very hard to find.
Yes. Yeah. That's my that's my problem. I think this is a really ambitious project, and we're trying to connect everything. And doing it in one repo has shown its challenges. I do think there are advantages of having a mono repo, but one of the disadvantages is that people do not know where to start. Um, and so having a core isolated repo of just like core commune functions, and then letting people fork commune to make their own like basically we want people to make their own like commune like repo, and then like turn that like into a subnet. And so like you have like and so that would be its own like the same repo as commune, but like it would be a slightly different flavor. So we ideally want that to happen, or we don't require you to have our repo. We just have you have commune installed, and you can create a subnet with your own repo that has nothing to do with commune, but this might be just one file, like one module file that links your repo with like the commune ecosystem. So that's kind of how like BitTensor's doing it, is like they have a subnet template, and then they'll tell you like all the things about that. We're obviously we're having something similar. We're gonna have something similar. It's gonna be a lot like easier. We're gonna have you test it locally. Like you don't have like you can make your own local test net or your own local subnet, like test on like without even requiring a chain, so you can like run on your own computer. Just making it a lot simpler for like developers to just like create these subnets, and making it cheaper too is the goal. Yeah.
So if I can jump in and ask a question quickly.
Sure.
So it feels like at present, what are your plans realistically moving forwards for trying to sort of broaden the scope of bringing more people who are maybe uneducated on the current topics of the way that systems like Commune and BitTensor work, to sort of like try and make it more accessible to new people trying to get into the ecosystem and things like that? Because it feels like there's quite a large barrier to entry in terms of knowledge and information. There's a lot of stuff that you sort of have to learn to be able to understand what's going on. So what's your perspective on sort of trying to make that a lot simpler and a much more sort of streamlined process, and make it easier for people to get involved in that way? Because it feels like only people who are already in the know can take part, if you know what I mean.
Yes. No, I totally agree with you in terms of it being a pretty closed off system. That's not intentional, but it wasn't by design.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just the fact that I'm a non-verbal person, so it's
Mm-hmm.
I wish there was visualization tools instead of writing. You just visualize what you're saying, but we're not in the future yet. But
No. Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean I'm a bad writer. I can document things pretty well. It's just, but yeah, it's like, I think what we need to do that to help address that is essentially have more visual, and simple tutorials.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, making a subnet. What's involved in making a subnet?
Yeah, of course.
Like what are the requirements? It's really not that hard, right? Like it's like I could even. Sorry if you hear the
No,
birds.
it's okay. I mean, for
No,
somebody who's already in the know, it seems quite easy and comfortable
yeah,
and simple.
like if I'm
Um,
just to explain to
oh,
you.
actually, one second. We're getting feedback from you with you sharing. So could you mute the shared window?
Oh, weird.
Yeah, it's very odd.
That is. Oh, the window itself is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just going to. How about now?
Testing. Yeah. No, it's not
Okay.
working quite.
Okay. How about now?
Let's try this. Nope. Try just muting. You can't just mute me because then you can't hear me.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know why this is happening, but okay. I just wanted to show exactly what I meant. I'm not sure how
No, I mean, I think vocally is perfectly fine. We can probably carry on like that because the whole plan is to make the documentation in the future, right? So we can sort of tackle that once we get to it. I don't think you necessarily have to show it here.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna show you like an example of like of a validator, right? I'm telling you like just me showing you like, okay, it's just these two files. In fact, you probably have this one module. So you got score module here, and then here I'm.
We can actually
calling
only
this
see your Discord window at the moment.
Oh, really? What the hell? Okay.
We might just
Sorry.
have to bench this and try and do something in the future, sort of explain it to everyone.
Yeah, no, we can do that. But sorry, let me just. I do not like Discord.
It's okay. It's no problem.
At least
but yeah.
they're I don't know. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, no. It's really not that hard. When you boil down like the basics. The issue though is getting to the basics.
Yeah, like for someone who's already in the know, it definitely seems like once you understand it, it sort of all pieces together like this beautiful jigsaw puzzle. But before that, you know what I mean? You're just sort of looking at almost a puzzle with no edge pieces, you know, where you don't really know where to start. And so I definitely feel like that's somewhere where it's possible for us to really, really branch out and attract a lot more people in and sort of get a much better idea of how to properly communicate to everybody else, because that's one of the biggest things when you're trying to draw people in, is making something accessible and making the knowledge easy to grasp so that people can sort of look at it, understand exactly like the benefits of it, and then sort of jump on board because it's an incredible idea. It's a beautiful system. It has so much potential. But I definitely feel like that would be like a really, really good next step, would be to look at anywhere that we can sort of make more formalized documentation to really sort of simplify but exemplify these core, really, really powerful features that Commune is going to provide to everyone.
Yes. 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 No, I agree. I agree. I think that is a priority for us. And for me, it's like I've been just in a hellhole of like just get this new refactoring. And now that I feel like I'm out of it. At least the tests show that. I really want to push this update with the documentation, and I think.
Yeah,
I think there's not too many things. I don't want to make the documentation a lot too, and there's not a lot of things to document really. It's more like there's a few key functions that I want people to know. At least those are the functions that I know myself, and then everything else, like most of the code is pretty redundant in that like a lot of it's reused.
Okay, so
like,
a lot of it's sort of like not necessarily integral to understanding the process. There's like 4 or 5 key nodes within the process that it's worthwhile knowing. So things like the validators, you know, things like what a subnet is and how that works. Those kind of things are things that are worthwhile sort of exemplifying. But sort of like the connecting pieces, at least for an outsider's perspective, they don't need to know sort of like the wires that go from one machine to another as a euphemism. You know, they just need to know each individual step themselves. So yeah, I think you're right in that sense, where it's going to be very easy for us to try and create a set of documentation that's sort of like 4 or 5 checkpoints or posts that we can pass. And then, I mean, hopefully, obviously the idea then is that the intake sort of comes flooding in, and all of the new processes that the new managers are trying to put in place are sort of going to really click in how much they're helping to sort of keep everything running. Have you felt like having the managers in place has been a big deal for you? Because it seems like they've been doing quite a lot.
It's yeah, I'm still figuring out like managers, and like we're still trying to get a lot of our projects just like in a sauna format, because it's pretty like it's just pretty chaotic. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, does it seem like we're sort of treading water now, and you're coming up, sort of coming up for air, as it were?
Yeah, there still seems like there's a lot to still do, but there's like a path. Like I see the shore. I'm not like fully panicking.
Yeah, the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it's like, it's just like it's a lot, and like I'll be honest, it takes a lot of time, and sometimes when you don't pay some developers, they'll threaten you. They'll like, and then like, and it just takes a lot of mental energy, and then you eventually realize that you just can't give in to like these things. and like
It
these
feels
people are
really easy to give in, doesn't it? It sort of feels like the easy way out, but a lot,
yeah,
further down the line, you're sort of promoting bad behaviors. And I think that's something else that's come up quite a lot recently is a lot of people don't really seem to understand the duration or like the time scales when it comes to like finishing a project or finishing a part of a project and then sort of receiving their pay or their remuneration or sort of, their benefits for having done that. So maybe it's worth sort of a small comment on clarifying that, and then we can release maybe some formal statements or documents on that for everybody who's not here. But maybe it's worth sort of talking just very briefly about the kind of timescales that people should be expecting to hear back when they've completed something.
If I may interject there, I feel like
Mhm.
the community has voted for these roles to help take that off your plate. Like, do you think that's something that we could have these roles handle for you? You said it's a lot of mental energy and it's very chaotic right now. And I know that we're working really hard to make that better for you so that you don't
yeah.
have to deal with it at all. Like,
It's
is there a
like,
problem with sending all those requests over to us in those roles?
no, there's no problem there. And that was my fault for because like they just spill in like people. Let's say they go through you, and then they'll contact me and like, hey, like Cool Razor said he reviewed, and sometimes they'll lie. They'll say like you reviewed it,
100%.
and like
Yeah, everyone's used to going to you. So
yeah.
if
So
that's the
it's
issue and they ever ping you, just say, "Don't know, go talk to Cool Razor. Don't know, go talk to Baco."
yeah.
You know what I mean? And you can
I'm gonna
even
do that
block
next time.
people if you need to, because I know that it's overwhelming. Baco himself was saying about he was just getting flooded with DMs and it was overwhelming for him, and you can't imagine how it'd be for you. But that's kind of the point, right? Let us take that off your plate for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that definitely takes time away from like core things and just like mental energy. Like sometimes I'll just stop working, like just because I just can't. Like
Well, it's
think.
Yeah.
exhausting, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
you said it
Mm-hmm.
yourself, and I totally see that. So let us help you, man.
Way of
yeah,
the
You know,
world.
like I
Yeah.
don't, I think your time is better spent doing these core things that you were just talking about. Also love to ask you questions about that in this AMA, the recent announcements that have been made. If you can bring some clarity, is there's been a little bit of back and forth, so I want to know exactly what the plan is, literally for next week, and even if there's something going on this week.
yeah. So I've been trying. Like I haven't paid too many devs this week. We've been trying to filter out a lot of the devs. Like I didn't really care about the farm to be honest. Like, but the fact that it was 90%, like that was going to the one person, really pissed me off. And I'm like, this is such a waste of money if this is the case.
Mhm.
Like I don't want to be. so so like I probably yeah. It's like, and you know it. Who knows if they're even telling the truth? Like you don't know who's telling the truth in this industry.
But in
But
terms
what
of
we do know,
what's coming in the immediate future, though, because I think that's what Cool
yeah,
Razor was trying to like focus on
yeah.
is like
Sorry.
what can we sort of expect?
Yeah.
You know,
So
Well, like
I think.
specifically the
Mhm.
announcements about subnet 0 and then the
Mhm.
others being different from the other subnets, that's coming. Like, is that happening? Is that not happening with the recent changes
yeah.
or announcements you've
So
made, but
subnet.
also Hanzo has made?
Yeah. So subnet zero will be essentially a general subnet that the community will vote on, and then the other subnets will essentially be specialized subnets, or like more specifically, they'll behave as Yuma consensus. And this is not going to be a permanent thing because and this wasn't really uh mostly like this was like I'm still thinking about whether this is a good idea, but I think the intentions are good. And it should be tried to like have the subnet specialize and then have a general subnet, because the goal here is to avoid like self voting and dishonest voting.
Mhm.
Um, and we're like we're not even 10% into our inflation. So like we really want to make sure that the next 15% before we do the first halving makes a lot of sense, like counts.
Mhm.
And like this, and so having like a system where we can like properly attribute like instead of me just doing it, like having like a proper self-voting system, or not self-voting but system that votes for things that
Mhm.
are usable. That's like the goal. And so this would be a transition towards that, I believe. will
So you
involve
said you didn't want it to be permanent, for example. So do you have a rough idea of a roadmap that you can sort of
yes.
communicate with the other managers and sort of like maybe even get something visual out for people to look at? Because obviously it's people can to a degree see the different modules and things like that and the different projects that are being worked on, but an idea of sort of like where the whole system, you have this vision in your head, is there a way to put that out there so that not only the other managers can sort of work with you on that vision, but so that everybody else can sort of be more in tune with like the idea of where you're hoping things will lead, obviously in the next 15% before that first halving being like the benchmark
Yes.
that you've set here?
Yes. So will be essentially, so this is going to be temporary, but the goal is essentially to have each subnet fully autonomous from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't want like this. So this might be, the subnet 0 might be slightly different than the other subnets, but subnet 0 is not controlling the other subnets. They're all separate subnets. So right
Mm.
now I think they just don't want to turn the other subnets into subnet zeros. Honestly, I think
Okay.
this is just going to be a transitionary stage. They also want, let's say, the minimum subnet, and before you get emissions, to have like, let's say, 8 to 5%.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna, like, there's some contention here between like what I want sometimes, because
Mm.
and then what, let's say, all the other builders want on the team, and so
Yeah.
we're trying to talk about it, and like I don't want it just to be me making all the decisions all the time, because I want
Yeah.
to have people like maybe regulate kind of like the stuff I'm doing, but at the same time I've noticed that it makes things change a lot slower.
It can do, but I think it's quantity over or quality over quantity, right? We don't want a lot
Yes.
of changes happening super quick. We want them to be impactful and not necessarily needing to be reverted. So if we're looking at sort of like the immediate future, you mentioned earlier that you were sort of toying with the idea of maybe a further announcement on Monday. So do you want to
Yes.
clarify a little bit more specifically on sort of what that is and
Yes.
maybe who you're working with to make that happen?
Yeah, so essentially, the problem we're trying to solve is like, okay, well, if I'm staking on someone, like I can stake
Mm-hmm.
on everyone.
Yeah.
And I like, you want to incentivize people to not just stake on
Diversify.
one subnet. You want to incentivize people to stake on other subnets and other modules. And so we're kind of like thinking about using like basically like the way Commune works already, like right now, as of right now,
Mm-hmm.
is when you stake on a subnet or when you stake on a module, it's basically converting your stake into it's converting your token into
Yeah.
a staked token on that subnet. So each
Yeah.
subnet has a staked token that's 1-to-1 to your native
Mm-hmm.
token. So there's no like token per se. Like there's no like, oh, these are stake tokens now. It's just commune that's staked. But when we're building the chain, when you go into like the logic,
Yeah.
you're actually converting your native token into a stake token.
And so
And
where's the
so
issue with this that we're trying to fix?
yes, so like the good thing is that this is very simple.
Yeah.
And so okay, I guess this might not be the right approach, but like the bad thing is that because the APR is the same,
Mm-hmm.
there's really no incentive to move your stake.
Okay,
Like
so everyone just sort of keeps it locked in the same place, and you're trying to
yeah,
avoid
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So you want to sort of like approach people and get them to sort of diversify, but it is a good way to do that, not to have a lot of like really good, interesting, powerful projects that are properly promoted to people.
Yes, yes. So that's I guess that's there's this is the theory in question. So you can
Okay.
have a subnet that, or a module per se, that essentially is creating something really valuable, and then people are going to stake to it just to get
Mm.
that value.
Yeah, I mean, Baka
Um,
made the similar point just now. He stated it's kind of a purpose of incentivizing the builders, because right now it feels like the majority, the majority, a large portion of at least the visual builders have been, as you've put, somewhat disingenuous, and they haven't necessarily been here to promote commune. And so what we're trying to do, obviously, is like crack down on making sure that the people who are taking part in the project are doing so in a meaningful way, and they're actually invested in the development of the project as opposed to just trying to make a quick buck by copying somebody else's work. And
yeah,
so do you think that like the new sort of guidelines and groundwork that's being laid is going to promote these people to sort of actually put their passion into the project and develop good things that people are going to want to invest towards.
Yeah, and this is what these projects or this new upgrade is going to allow. The subnet 0 is essentially going to be the general subnet that, like, we technically don't need more general subnets.
Okay.
But the general subnet will essentially just be for the community to support and vote on projects that are cool with their tokens,
Okay.
essentially.
Yeah.
And so that already, you know, like, that doesn't change Commune at all. Now
Why
the
would
other
they do that?
thing,
Why would they be incentivized to remove their stake from a working validator that does X service to a new validator that does Y service? Like, why would you want to unstake and move your stake in that example you gave?
well, you're assuming they're all working. Yeah, like, if a validator is not working, then I'm not gonna restake onto it. But
No,
but
not you personally.
yeah,
Like anyone.
okay, I see what you mean. So yeah, that's a good question. So we want to incentivize. We want to essentially, at least on the subnet level and probably on the module level as well, we want to basically reward additional, like, tokens that aren't the native token but are swapped. They can have, like, they're tradable tokens, but you get, like, let's say on top of, like, let's say I stake onto you. In order for me, like, if I believe in your project, then I'm gonna stake to you. But at the same time, like, I want there to be an additional incentive, because, you know, I can stake someone else and get the same reward. Now, if you have a token per module, like, let's say per application that people build, or it could be per subnet. So in addition to the emissions I get in my native token, I get an additional minted token that, like, is, you know, essentially you can judge the price on that based on the liquidity pool, like, you know, based on, like, what's in the pool of, like, you know, of those tokens with, like, you know, the native token. But that essentially, what that extra token does, like, so if I'm staked to a subnet, and every time I'm, like, staked to that subnet, every block, I get one token in native token, but each token I get in the native token, I get in the emission in the additional token, like, in the, basically, like, it's like a voting token for that subnet. And so, like, it's kind of similar to, like, how, well, it's a little similar to how Dynamic Tau is doing it, but it's more, like, flexible, I think, because these are, like, fully tradable, like, tokens that, like, are on the network, and they're not, like, the goal of it is to essentially incentivize people to stake onto and get meme, like, basically get, like, meme tokens as they're staking, in addition to their emissions. So that, like, oh, like, if I'm staked onto, like, this subnet, not only do I have the emissions, now I have this extra, like, you know, loyalty token that I can use to vote on that subnet. For the module, if you want to do it to the module level, then, you know, these tokens technically, I'm not sure. I haven't really thought of it too much on the module level, but I bet, like, we want to start on the subnet level, then we want to do it on the module level as well, to incentivize, like, you know, oh, if you voted for me, or if, for this long, then, like, each block you vote for me, like, all the emission that came from you voting for me, you get an additional, like, set of, like, tokens that I'm doing, like, emitting, basically. But does that make sense? It's kind of complicated the way I'm explaining it.
So, like, to
But
sort of try and simplify it from what I've understood so far, is the general idea is you'll obviously have your stake within a specific subnet, and then the longer or the more that is invested into that subnet from you personally, your voting sort of carries a little bit more weight. So you have a little bit more control the longer you're in there.
essentially, yeah.
Okay.
So, but that's also, so there's also subnet to these subnet tokens, but the question now, and I'll have to think about this a little more before I make a full, like, proposal on Monday, and then this proposal is gonna be really quick, because once I formalize this, we're gonna be making the change either later that week or the week after. Like, we want to do this really quickly, but we also want to do this right.
Okay.
But basically, when I'm minting, so let's say every token, like let's say I stake onto the subnet. Now, every token that I get as a reward from my staking, I get an additional token, or like n number of tokens.
Yeah, it's
Like
compounding.
that's a parameter. So now, now I have these extra minted tokens. So if I have if I put 10 tokens on and I got like 10 other minted tokens, then like what's my, I guess another question I'm trying to think of is like, how do you do I need to transfer those new tokens through Commune? Does that make sense? Like, you're using the Uniswap protocol, you can just use a ratio of let's say you can lock, you can say, oh, each subnet can lock a portion of its emissions into a liquidity pool. And then maybe I can lock 10% of the emissions on my subnet into this liquidity pool, and then this liquidity pool will essentially have like Commune in it, but also like this newly minted token. And so
this will be the token that's used for voting and waiting and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay, but then, so it's been asked, why do you feel that there's such a need to implement this change so quickly? Obviously, you want to get the announcement out Monday, and then
questioning whether it's even a good thing to do, because there's, again, like, this is.
I mean, it feels good in sort of like in idealism if you think about it in a perfect bubble. But are you not just going to incentivize people to actually not diversify because the compounding control that they gain from having all of their investment in a single subnet is going to be worth more than them actually diversifying into multiple different subnets and only having a small amount of actual like weighting to the voting that they can do there? Are you actually sort of not doing the inverse of what you want?
Well, in this case, you're trying to basically keep the emissions the same. You don't want people to worry about their APR going down, but you also want to use some like FOMO energy in trying to find proper projects. Because
I mean, a big part of that, do you not think, could come from the proper advertising or outreach for those projects? So, for example, I know that the Build and Stake is going through like a kind of a revamp on the system and how it's going to work and things, and that's going to bring a lot more awareness to a lot of these projects, hopefully in like a really good way. And do you not think that that's actually also going to help to solve the problems that we're currently having, potentially with things sort of being streamlined too much into single areas and sort of letting the projects speak for themselves as opposed to us sort of like speaking for them, if you know what I mean?
Yes. No. That will definitely help. But the issue though is that I think the issue that we're trying to solve is that we want it to be like, if you support a project, then how do we know you're not just like, we want you to believe in it. And there are some people, some stakers that want to support a project because they believe in it. But unfortunately, a lot of people, I think, just don't care about other than like price going up.
But is that a problem? So what I mean is, obviously, the project itself is still receiving like direct funding, right? It's still being allowed. It's still being enabled to do what it does, regardless of whether or not the people who are actually staking to it. I mean, in a way, both are a sign of faith, right? But it's a case of like, does it matter if that faith is genuine or not genuine? They're still putting in. I mean, everybody, to use a crude example, everybody's money's green, right? So regardless of their incentive, it's still a case of the project itself is still receiving the same amount of funding. So is it a problem if they're not necessarily being genuine in their belief of the project, but they're just being genuine in their belief to make profit? Are those not?
That's fair. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we have to be aware of how do we allow for people to support projects. Like we want to make unstaking and staking easy, for instance, like, because we want people to easily support projects if they believe in it. But unfortunately, there's no incentive for me to support a new project if I'm already on this existing project. There's no incentive for me to do that.
You can believe in more than one thing. I think, at least for me, one of the takeaways is that it feels like this is sort of a very wide scope. It might even be a larger scope change than a lot of people first realized, because it's sort of changing the entire staking system. And it just feels like setting a time scale on that of like, I want to have it defined in my head by Monday and then I want to roll it out within a week or two. It feels like it's sort of a much larger, almost overhaul style change. So do you not think that it might be worth sort of like getting community consensus on that? Or like Cool said here, that since it's such a large change and there isn't like a core group of developers, as you've said, is there a way to set up like voting for this in like a public manner so that the community can actually make the decision, obviously, as is within the breadth of what Commune wants in being decentralized and having the community decide things? Do you not think that there's a way to sort of do that? And then other people might even have really great ideas that can help us to sort of formulate what the overall outcome ends up being, as opposed to sort of trying to take this all on yourself and sort of like arrange for everything to be done. Do you not think that's sort of a better avenue, perhaps, than trying to push it out?
It's not going to be. It's not going to be. It's not going to be rushed. Like it's going to feel maybe rushed, but it's not going to be. It's not going to be done without the community being involved in making decisions. I want to be making a proposal, like fully formalized, like for Monday.
Okay, so sort of
then,
like a presentation telling people
yeah,
sort of how
well,
you
the
think it's
code's
going
going
to
to be
be, and
ready to be
then.
upgraded. Like I'm gonna. My goal is to have the code ready to be upgraded for Monday. But if at least.
I mean, how much time do you think people are going to get to sort of formulate their opinion? Because it feels like this is something that people are going to want to sort of like know a little bit more about and things like that. And there's going to need to be sort of conversation back and forth. So what kind of time scale? Obviously, if you have your proposal done by Monday, what kind of time scale do we think we're going to get for everybody else to sort of like get their opportunity to comment?
Yeah. So there's going to be a meeting that's going to next week, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, talking about it, about the new changes.
Will the Wednesday meeting overlap with the event, or is this a private thing?
We're gonna have it separate. We're gonna either we can do Tuesday then.
Yeah, I think that might be better.
But yeah, like in that case, we can essentially just like talk about it and see any potential concerns.
Is there going to be a way for people who obviously maybe can't attend that, or for people to like pre-read up? So are you going to be able to post your version of the proposal on Monday?
I'm going to post it Monday.
Do you think we should maybe delay it to give people a few days to sort of understand?
Yeah. Then we can maybe do it on Thursday or on Wednesday. We can talk about it.
Yeah.
And then like essentially we want to. We just want to incentivize stakers to stake early projects that could become more valuable. And so this is what I think. This is what a lot of protocols are trying to do. This is what BitTensor is trying to do with Dynamic Tau. They're trying to create this Uniswap protocol. They're essentially using Uniswap protocol, which is the ratio between two liquidity pools to determine the price of the subnet token with respect to Dynamic Tau. And so the point of that, I personally, like, I've been thinking about that for a lot, and I've been thinking about having subnets have their own tokens for a long time. But I part of me disagrees with it. Part of me wants to try it, but I do think that a good in between is to at least give people the option to convert their subnet into a token. Now they don't have to.
Okay,
but,
I mean, we can get further into that on Thursday. If we have that meeting, can't we? We can sort of like deep dive onto that, and everybody can sort of
deep
come
dive.
in.
But this will give people the option to essentially create their own like token on the subnet level, and we might do it on the module level. However, another way of doing that doesn't require subnet tokens on Commune, but you can use the emissions from Commune to then direct into a liquidity pool on like Ethereum to like Uniswap, and so you can have your own subnet token that's not even on Commune
So
to incentivize this as well.
It promotes that branching out and that
yes, it promotes like the loyalty program with if you stake to me, not only do you get the submissions, but you get like these additional rewards. And so maybe that's not necessary. Maybe you just need. I think maybe you're right. Like, and I think you might be. That, like, maybe you just need a structure where people just have staked like things staked to their address. Because ideally, this is all just like you know,
I mean, that
this,
structure is incoming though, right? That's what's currently sort of in the works,
yes,
separate from the individual, like specific individual modules that are being
yes,
built. This
yes,
structure is like coming out, and so like a really good benefit is once this groundwork is laid and whatnot, then it will become very apparent where the air holes in the tire are, for example. Where there's other areas of the protocol that can sort of be optimized or improved in one way or another. So
yes.
I think so for the immediate future, the focus sort of seems to be in like revitalizing and revivifying everything that's coming up, and sort of getting everything to a good foundational level, because the massive influx and amount of interest that we've seen recently within Commune has meant that there's been some problems in controlling that influx. And so once that's stable and steady and we have everything under control, it will be a lot easier for us to identify where there's other areas of the protocol that maybe need sort of a little bit of a nudge or a little bit of help or optimizations. And that's kind
Yes.
of where the current focus is going to be, on making sure that this foundation is laid properly, even if that takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, yeah, and so we might not need the subnet tokens at all, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ideally, what like, and my biggest critique against the subnet tokens is that it's another form of complexity that confuses people even more.
Yeah, I mean, it's even just from this conversation, it's become very clear that it's a very multifaceted topic that has sort of a lot of
Yes.
for and a lot of against, and so there's very, very
Yeah,
easy room
yeah.
for people to sort of get bogged up in that back and forth.
It's good to give the option, though. I think it shouldn't be
Potentially.
required. And
Mhm.
these are Commune is essentially like me just making a general form of BitTensor that makes things optional. Like,
Gives you
like,
more flexibility and control. Not
yes.
necessarily like optional, but gives you more options per se.
Sorry, yeah. Things
Yeah.
are optional, but yeah, no, the goal, and so, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like it's kind of like again, we could do runtime upgrades, so it's like
Mm-hmm.
we're always going to be a beta play. It's gonna be,
Mm-hmm.
even in this system, like we'll support each other. We have a lot of subnets
Mm-hmm.
that from the BitTensor community that want to essentially also work on Commune. So like we'll
Mm-hmm.
be seeing a lot more of that in the coming weeks. Of like
Yeah, a lot of handshaking.
sorry.
A lot of handshaking.
Yeah, well, hands were already shaked, man. But it's like we want to, like, I just like to build stuff, and
Yeah.
I met a lot of these subnet people in person, and I've also helped I've helped advise and build some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, and so like it's like I'm not going to name any names because
Mm-hmm.
there's obviously politics in this game,
Yeah, without a
uh,
doubt.
but yeah, unfortunately,
So
but but
to sort of like
yeah,
summarize, the immediate future plan is sort of like assisting in making sure that this new groundwork that we put in place with the managers and the new systems and cleaning up of everything sort of goes through well. And then it's going to be a case of engaging with the community to explore where we can perhaps like give people even more options and incentivize them to do things in different ways, and sort of make sure that we really get everybody involved in
yes.
as many ways as possible.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Essentially, we want to incentivize more. We want the community to be more
Hmm.
involved with selecting modules, whether it's using them
Yeah.
or staking them.
Okay.
And so that was a big reason as to why I wanted to minimize the maximum. Like I want to have a maximum cap for stake
You wanted to
because
diversify.
I want to diversify it.
Yeah,
Yes,
of
and so
course, of course.
it's just like this wouldn't affect anyone's APRs. This
Hmm.
would just force people to spread it out to other validators that are smaller.
Yeah.
Um, and so like the whole goal for me is to have a
Mm.
fair and decentralized protocol.
Yeah.
And I know we're not there yet. But like where obviously this isn't a 1 or 2 day project. This is
No, I
like
mean, we're
something.
definitely moving. Even within the last week or so, there's been huge changes and so many steps taken. But I mean, I guess the last thing really is to see if there's anything that anybody else wants to sort of like throw into the hat. If there's anything that anybody else has left to ask before we wrap things up.
Yeah.
But even if not, I mean, we're sort of exciting things coming up moving forwards. We've got this new foundational groundwork and the new sort of like rebirth, as it were, coming through to make sure that everybody is focusing on sort of like the best thing possible for Commune. It doesn't seem like anybody else particularly has anything. There's nothing coming through.
Feel free to ask them. People always have questions, but they're just too
I mean, it's
shy.
okay. What we can try and do is we can actually
So-
try and sort of set topics, like other topics, because obviously this was a future topic, and we've gone through, I think, quite a lot of what was anticipated for the future, and sort of come around to identifying exactly what it is that we're looking at now. So maybe some of the future topics, when we get more into maybe specific modules or specific aspects of what's being developed, we'll get a lot more directed questions. But I think we sort of covered like what the next 2 or 3 weeks maybe of Commune look like.
Yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
no. And it's always changing every day. But yeah, no. A lot of I felt like even sometimes it feels like a slow day because it's like, or a slow week because you just deal with so much
Yeah, there's so
drama.
many
I feel
small
like.
hurdles, speed bumps. We'll call them speed bumps.
Yeah, man. Like
You can't pedal
just
to the
wake up.
metal.
You wake up to fires every day.
Yeah.
But I guess hopefully at least you're putting them out.
Oh,
And
without
then
a doubt. I
eventually,
mean, they've been
yeah,
put out extensively. I think that people are doing God's work out here and really helping everybody to make sure that that
seriously getting a lot
we're
better
running.
though. It's just I've been, especially with this core update, it's just gonna get a lot better. Things are gonna be much easier to do. Like I've just been doing a full revamp. Oh, sorry. Oh, no.
It's okay.
Doing a full revamp
Mhm.
on just like making sure that things are synced with the chain,
Yeah.
making sure things don't take too long, and like
Mhm.
and yeah, like I'm also trying not to like be too aggressive
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
with the mining as well, because I know that people are saying like, oh, we're just mining all. I'm like, okay, well, I know that I'm designing the validators,
Yeah.
so I'm trying to make it fair for. I'm not. I'll
Mhm.
validate, but I'm not going to mine that much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it
um,
feels like one of the big things is that you've been able to sort of like get a lot of work done on this core. Hopefully, like continuing, you'll be able to get even more work done and sort of continue to take those steps away and take that burden off yourself now that the managers are really coming into their roles.
and whoever wants to be a
Mhm.
manager, like we well, like we're willing to accept more managers. Like clearly having many managers, the more managers we have, I think. Uh, we don't want too many, maybe not more
I
than like
mean,
5 or 10.
I
But
think too many cooks spoil the broth. I think it's very clear that once we establish what's going on now and that this foundation that's being built is laid, then, like we said earlier, we'll see where those holes are potentially that we can find ways to fix. And maybe there's room there to sort of get more people on board and things like that. But I
yes,
mean, I think the one thing we definitely don't want to do is rush things and sort of put someone in a position where maybe they shouldn't have been. But yeah,
yeah,
so I think so sort of in summary, the next sort of week or 2 weeks looks like sort of like continuing to lay the foundation of the groundwork, deal with or the developer side of things that's currently being gone over and fixed and touched up and whatnot, and then seeing where we can sort of shoot for the moon afterwards. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Perfect. Beautiful.
Yeah, like
It's exciting.
it's exciting, man. No,
Mm.
and like, yeah, it's like we have lots of like, like I've done this with my personal funds, and like, the
Mm-hmm.
fact that we're able to get to this point without
Yeah, it must be
even
incredible.
well, it's definitely stressful. I'll say that.
Well,
But
I'm
it's
sure
it's
we're
definitely
on the up
something
and up.
I'm proud of. Like
Yeah.
I was trying my best not to take VC funding,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still tempting because but I think that like just creating something from the like foundational from the ground up,
Yeah.
people believing in you, like
For the
is
community.
just
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a good community. And yeah, like to me, I just like to think of it if I'm building honestly, because like I'm willing to go like fully into like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quitting until I have like maybe a certain amount of my bank account where I'm like, okay, I have like I need to I need to have rent for at least 4 or 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
But
Wow.
until that's just my philosophy, man. It's just
Yeah.
like everything that I've like sold, and like yeah, like I'll openly you can trace my account, like you can trace the main account to see how much I
Well,
sell, right?
yeah, I don't
Like,
think any of us need to do that. But I mean, I think the
well,
takeaway
people
is
do,
that
man. People like I don't think I've sold that much actually.
I think we can have our actions speak louder than words on this one. I think people will
Yeah, well,
understand
it's like
when people can really once all this foundation is laid, I think people will see
people will,
exactly
man.
what's been sacrificed by the people who want to make this work.
But
But
yeah, but it's
unfortunately,
crazy.
we're at the point where I don't think there's any more questions coming in.
Yeah, I know. I just want to say
Yeah.
one thing. It's just
Mhm.
that I'm sure some people have made more money on my own protocol than I have.
I mean,
And then like
potentially.
I don't know, but I'm just assuming like I've just been like really holding
Mhm.
because this is every time I sell something, like this is like my whole life, like that
Yeah.
I'm incentivized to say that, but it's just like I don't know. It's just like if I dilute myself too quickly,
Mhm.
then like I do have like I think 13 to 14% of the total, but that's like right now. Like
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, it's
the
the
next
dedication of your passion, I think, is what a lot of people sort of have to appreciate and understand. Is like, it's not, I mean, it's not just about money. It's about doing something and making something that you're passionate about. And it's so important that you can sort of make that a reality. So I think a lot of people have a lot of respect.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and it's difficult, man. It's still really painful, but
Hmm.
it's definitely worth it. I have no regrets in not doing like me quitting my job. Like you know,
Hmm.
there was definitely a lot of trying times
Yeah.
and living very frugally. And I don't think I live a very extensive life even now. I kind of just have the same lifestyle. I just skateboard and stuff. I don't even need a car.
I mean, let's make it worthwhile for everybody.
I
But
think yeah,
thank you so much for
yeah,
coming on and sort of engaging with us and talking with us about the next couple of weeks. We appreciate it.
man. No, appreciate that. Yeah, no, there's a lot of cool updates. Yeah, like you know, I think it's tomorrow we have our building stake, so we're gonna see a lot of what the community is building.
Hmm.
But I think hopefully next week things will be more into full swing. I feel like we've been in the
Yeah.
adjustment phase the past like week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, so everybody make sure that you come up and you attend the build and stake because it's going to be the revivification. It's going to be a big deal. And it's going to be where everybody is going to be able to see what's happening, what new stuff's coming out. But thank you everyone for coming. I think this is going to be it.
All right, man. All right. Someone's calling me or something.
Mhm.
But
That's okay.
all right, guys.
But yeah,
Take care. Thanks for your call.
everybody take care. Thank you very much for showing up.
Thanks for showing up. Take care, guys. Have a good day. Peace.